everyone, and hello David. Thank you so much for joining me today for the latest patient perspectives as we take a look at the impact that genomics is having within patient lives. Today we are joined by David Rose, a rare disease patient. So David, if you could just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do as well.
Yeah, thank you very much, Shannon. Delighted to be here today. So my name's David Rose and I have an ultra rare disease called Occipital Horn Syndrome. It's similar to something called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which you may have heard of. My day job, I'm working for a rare disease magazine called Rare Evolution magazine. That's been a really great opportunity for me. I've been working there for just over 3 years now. Alongside the magazine, I'm a trustee for a small bladder charity in the UK. And I also volunteer for Great Ormond Street Hospital. Obviously quite often doing speaker engagements similar to this, at conferences, and sort of working with a couple of pharmaceutical companies. So it's been a really interesting kind of change of direction to working in rare disease. It's not kind of my background at all. I studied economics at university, so it's funny how life takes you, but yeah, really relishing the opportunity.
For those who don't know, would you be able to kind of go over what kind of occipital horn syndrome it is and kind of how that links to Ehlers-Danlos syndrome as well?
Yeah, sure. So occipital horn syndrome is, like, the kind of definition of it is it's a milder version of something called Menkes disease, which is something else people might have heard of, still another rare disease, but obviously slightly more well known than occipital horn. The link to Ehlers-Danlos is because occipital horn syndrome is partly a copper deficiency. That's where the main part of it comes from. But it's also a connective tissue disorder, which is exactly what Ehlers-Danlos is, or EDS. So it's the kind of the collagen obviously in your skin underneath it. So it's not just the kind of musculoskeletal side, which is obviously what I think a lot of people think of when they think of sort of hypermobility syndromes and things like that. And obviously EDS is the same as mine. It's not just the joints and the muscles, it's also kind of the internal problems. So things your bladder, your kidney, heart, bowel, everything, pretty much every organ has something like slightly wrong with it. So I've obviously had it since I was born. It's a genetic condition, but I didn't actually find out until a bit later. But yeah, there is a kind of very strong link to EDS, and it used to be considered one of the kind of mega rare subtypes until the classifications of EDS changed. I think that there may have been maybe 10, 12 different types. I think there might only be about 5 now. And I think, mine was one of the conditions that kind of became its own thing, but it's definitely a strong link to Ehlers-Danlos.
Would you be able to kind of describe your kind of path to get that diagnosis and kind of the twists and turns in that process as well?
Yeah, sure. So when I was younger, just for kind of the context, I can go into more detail, but obviously I was in and out kind of hospital settings pretty much from birth. So I was at Great Ormond Street Hospital from when I was about, I think, maybe 18 months, something like that. And then at Addenbrooke's Hospital in Cambridge, kind of alongside that and before that as well. So I had a few different kind of health problems that nobody really thought too much of. Initially, I was kind of didn't really hit the kind of key milestones. So I didn't walk until I was just gone 2. I didn't crawl, didn't cruise, didn't do any of that. So that was something that people thought, was a bit unusual. But I'm certainly not the only baby in the world that didn't walk for a long time. It's relatively common, I suppose. So nobody thought too much of that. I had a couple of hernia operations very early on. Again, unusual, but not that unusual, I suppose. But kind of when I was young, I think I was about 3 maybe, at Great Ormond Street Hospital. I think they were saying, we don't really know exactly what this is, but they were the ones that said it could be Ehlers-Danlos. So they were pretty much on the right track, although it wasn't 100% the correct diagnosis back then. It wasn't too far away. And also for kind of context, so that was, checking my maths now, so I'm 32, so 29 years ago that was, and also the medical pathways and the sort of diagnostics has got so much better now with EDS. Back then it was pretty much unheard of. Now, like, I've met quite a lot of people that have Ehlers-Danlos, so it's interesting to see how that's changed. But kind of as I grew older, I didn't really kind of fit maybe the criteria for like a conventional EDS diagnosis. So obviously there's different types, but I think they thought I had maybe the classical type, because I've always been hypermobile, but kind of through people that I've met in work and volunteer capacities, I'm very flexible, but I'm nothing compared to some people. So people that may or may not know with EDS, quite often you're measured on something called the Baton score, which is like a diagnostic criteria for some of the hypermobility parts of EDS. And I think I scored nearly 4 on that, but I didn't think I was actually that flexible compared to some people. But some of the tests that I had done, I still kind of fitted the EDS criteria, and I had all the kind of obvious tick boxes. We have lots of bladder and heart problems, lots of recurring hernias, but didn't really have the kind of, I have desiccated a few things, but nothing like daily like some people seem to with EDS. So kind of as I got older, I didn't really fit that criteria anymore. So when I was 23, 24, kind of after a few different operations then as well, they were looking into seeing if it's something a bit different, and that's when the genetics testing started. So that was, obviously a few years ago now. It took about 4 years, 3.5 years to kind of come up with the diagnosis and to find the right gene that was affected. And obviously it's a definitive gene to find. So it's something called an ATP7A gene, and that's what Occipital Horn Syndrome is. So it's an X-linked recessive condition. So my mum passed that to me. We had our kind of all of our family tested, and kind of like extended family with like maternal cousins and aunties and uncles, that kind of thing, nieces, nephews. So it was just interesting to see how that kind of came about. But thankfully, it's just me that has it, and nobody else in my family has been affected. So it's kind of nice to have a name for something, but it doesn't really solve. I don't know if you're going to ask me about this, but it doesn't really solve anything because there's no treatment, there's no research or anything. So although I've got the name for it, which is a holy grail for some people trying to find the name of what they've got, it doesn't always mean it's a huge life-changing thing, because my life doesn't necessarily improve just because I know the name of it. That's really the kind of reality of it, I guess.
What was it like at the time, kind of having to go to that extended family and say, like, tell them like, oh, you might want to get tested and stuff like that? What was that kind of experience like?
For me, I'm like quite unemotional about things. I don't think it really impacted me as much, but I know my mum is obviously very emotional. Like, my mum is more of an emotional person aside from health than I am. But obviously, since she realized that, she would never have known that she was carrying that condition, you wouldn't be tested for that. But obviously my mum feels a lot of guilt, like personally to me, and I think that probably carried through with having to get my my mum's, so like my maternal side sort of family checked, to my sister and everything. But thankfully everyone else is okay. It's just me. But I think my mum found it quite emotional, because she, although it's definitely not her fault, she sometimes feels like it's her fault. And I think that's probably quite a common theme in kind of carrier side of rare disease. Everyone often thinks about like the patient, but actually that's only a small part of actually what happens. It's a quite a broader topic. And also like things, if I were to have, I don't have any kids, but if my partner and I have kids, then it has more of an impact, because at the time when I was told what I had, I was single, I was a lot younger, I didn't have as much impact. Whereas now, like in my early 30s, like it would be very feasible to have kids now, and I'd have to kind of consider the different options. I think the time you get diagnosed makes a difference to how much an impact, I guess, it has on your life. Because obviously when you're a lot younger, you're probably not thinking about having kids so much. Well, not everybody, but as a general thing, it's not as much of a thing at that age. Whereas now, lots of my friends have already got kids, if not 1 or 2 already. So it maybe has more of an impact now, but it's definitely something to think about. I think the knock-on effects of having a genetic condition are more obvious kind of in your like sort of either childbearing or to have children at that age.
What was sort of known at the time about the condition, and how did you then have to kind of teach yourself about it and trying to kind of understand it and come to terms with your diagnosis?
Yeah, it's a good question. So there isn't really much literature out there. Like obviously this was going back about 6 years now. When I first, I kind of Googled it, because obviously when I spoke to the genetics doctor, he said like, I've never seen anyone with it before, and it's anything that you find will be a result. Like he said, sort of, you're not really going to find tons of research or tons of people with this condition. That's the whole point of having kind of an ultra rare condition. So he suggested trying there's a few sort of sites for rare disease, like Ormond, I think, is one of them, and OrphanNet and things like that. So I found some of the science behind it, but really, like, I haven't found, there isn't really like a patient sort of population with the condition. And now, like, if I kind of Google it from time to time, and I was involved in a couple of paper. It wasn't research as such; it was more just a paper about the condition. So I offered to take part in that kind of at my hospital and different things. So now, if you Google it, kind of quite a few of the articles, if or the journals are about me anyway, so it's not really sort of research about anything different. Like I'm the case study, or I'm one of the case studies, so it doesn't really help an awful lot. But like I'm happy to help in any way I can. But yeah, there isn't an awful lot of research. Although it's frustrating sometimes, there's actually, I think, a benefit as well, because I think sometimes you can definitely Google and you can kind of go too deep in something and sort of worry yourself way too much. So I think actually like a bit of naivety might be a good thing. Because I think if you start going down that rabbit hole of looking at absolutely everything, like you could do that for anything. And I think that if you've got something rare and very unusual, like if you think of something like a really common thing, like I don't know, like asthma or high blood pressure, like there's risks and everything, but there's a big patient population for those conditions, and you can see that kind of averages about things a bit easier. Whereas when you have something so unusual, it's hard enough with a rare disease, but if you've got something ultra rare, like there's no point in looking at statistics or anything, because there's not enough people to be a good sample. So I think it's actually quite nice to not have to look at it every day. I think sometimes oh, it'd be nicer if I had like a relatively common rare disease and I might be able to find more information and different things with it. But actually I think sometimes not having the information is also good in a different way. I think everybody's different. I think it's because I actually don't like to think about it too much. I'm happy to do kind of my talks and and sort of other engagements, but actually I don't really like looking at my health too much. I think the reason how I've coped with it over the years is by not thinking about it, or it's not kind of making it a bigger thing. So I try to, I have to live with it and I can't hide away from it. But I think if I was sitting there, every day till 4 a.m. like researching different things, I think it would drive me mad. So yeah, a little bit of naivety might be good.
Yeah, you're the only person in the UK with this condition, right? And like, what has that kind of been like, I suppose? And like, have you kind of ever like tried to reach out to like other people across the world who have it as well?
Yeah, so there is actually a guy kind of fairly recently that was from Ireland. We don't really have much contact like in general with people, but I found obviously he's in Ireland. There's a guy in Germany, sorry, and then there's two guys in Sweden who I've met, all kind of fairly similar ages, so kind of sort of between late 20s and early 40s, I think. So kind of we're all within about 10 years of each other. So yeah, we've spoken a little bit, but it's not an active patient community or anything. Like some of the kind of more common things like like haemophilia or cystic fibrosis, things that people have heard of outside of the rare disease community. They've got like dozens of patient groups, especially in bigger countries like America and Canada and stuff. They've got dozens of like chapters within their own country, whereas like obviously there isn't a single group for my condition like globally as far as I know. I think there were kind of different Facebook groups where people might have thought they had it, but I don't think any of them actually, well, I don't know, I kind of dipped out of it because I didn't really find a benefit. I actually don't, sometimes I think kind of going back to the research and the like the literature that's out there, I think actually not permanently talking about it, it'd be nice to maybe find some more people if they do exist and they're out there, but actually I think a little bit of separation from it is good, because I already work in rare disease. I volunteer for a rare disease hospital. I'm a trustee for an unusual form of catheter. Like I'm quite, without even trying, I'm already doing a lot of stuff in healthcare and rare disease. So actually I need a bit of escapism as well. So I think it's actually, if I was a big active member of that side of the community, I think it would probably be too much. So actually, again, like I'm trying to see it from a positive way, is that actually maybe not being so social about it is a good thing, because I think that's just how I kind of have dealt with it, I guess.
Yeah, a lot of people kind of find support within these like patient organizations and charities and things like that. Where have you kind of got that support from? Because as you said, you kind of want to have that like escapism, I suppose, but where do you kind of get that support from to kind of cope with the condition?
Yeah, so I guess kind of like outside of like if you separate like my own friends that I had before I had anything to do with rare disease, obviously I've made friends in the rare disease community, obviously all with different conditions. So one of the kind of big campaigns that I was part of recently with 16 other people, like they're all really nice bunch of people, all with different kind of rare diseases, all in the UK. They've been a good support group. It's just been nice to deal with people that are kind of also like me, trying to make a difference in some way and try and sort of tell their story. So it's been obviously really nice to connect with them through work. Obviously I've met lots of people, my colleagues are great. I don't know anyone, like I've never met anyone with my condition, but I've met a few people kind of along the way. Also on social media, like I've found a few people, obviously, well, there's lots of people now with EDS, kind of stayed in contact with them. I've met a few of them in person, so that was nice. So yeah, kind of like, I guess, kind of through work, and because I obviously work in rare disease and my volunteer stuff is also with rare disease as well, I've met a lot of people with different conditions from that. So, I've still found a community. There isn't obviously a kind of social media community for my condition, but I've made friends with other people with different rare diseases, at conferences or whether it's online, social media, however it's been. I think everyone is so open to friendship. I think it's, as you get older, like away from rare disease life, your friendship circle tends to get a bit smaller. Everyone does different things, they move away, have kids, get married, like life changes a little bit anyway. But I've noticed that everyone that I've met in the kind of the rare disease space, like, all different ages, not everyone is my age. I've met people that are way older, people that are a bit younger. Like, it's nice to have quite a varied group of people, like, because in reality I probably wouldn't have met most of them if I didn't have a rare disease. So like, there are positives of having it, is that you've met some really cool people that you wouldn't have probably come into contact with before. So yeah, there's definitely positives to it.
Yeah, kind of on a day-to-day basis, like how does this condition kind of affect how you live, and what challenges have you faced along the way?
Yeah, so again, it's really similar to EDS. So my health seems to go kind of through stages. I've had lots and lots and lots of surgeries now and procedures over the years, and it's sort of way over 100. So you can't really tell when they're coming. Sometimes you might have 5 years of feeling awful, and then a year of feeling great, and then 10 years of feeling awful, and then 15 years feeling good. It just varies so much. Like, there's no real pattern to it. Obviously that made school and sort of work life quite difficult before, just because it's so unpredictable. Day to day, that I wouldn't really say there is a day to day, because there's not really the same thing. Obviously pain and fatigue are at the forefront of everything. The pain, you could argue that you can take a lot of strong painkillers and you can kind of combat some of the pain, but fatigue is probably more overwhelming than pain sometimes, because there's nothing you can do for fatigue. Like, fatigue is obviously very different to being tired. It's like a migraine and a headache, or nausea and vomiting. Like, they're very different things. And I think if you think of fatigue, it's so different, and it's really overwhelming, because obviously sometimes you can't deal with that, like the kind of the brain fog, I guess you'd want to call it, from taking so many, like, cocktail of painkillers and all the things that you take for the bladder and your heart and everything else that you're sort of using. So daily it's quite difficult, because you have to find that sweet spot of managing to take enough kind of pain relief and take enough medication that your body can function, but you have to be at the right point that your mind can function as well, because all well and good taking this medication, but if you can't function, like, you're not really living. So it's a very difficult one to answer. But yeah, I think fatigue is probably the biggest problem that I have daily, because it's something that you can't escape. And obviously I've still got work life, and I've got friendships and a relationship and everything to maintain. I've still got things to do kind of around the house. Like, you can't really escape it. And I think that we were talking before we came on about like the heat and things. So I personally find like the heat's really good. So I'm generally better in summer than I'm in winter. So there is a trend, I guess, of that, in the sense that certainly my joints feel a lot better, and my kidney feels better when it's warmer, because I think you're not kind of stiffening up and you're not tensing the whole time when it's cold. So I think that's really the only way you can measure the difference, is kind of summer to winter, really. Definitely find the heat helps, but quite often when you have a rare disease, you tend to have more than one thing. Ehlers-Danlos is exactly the same. Like, lots of people will have kind of comorbidities. So I have something called POTS, which is it's not rare. It's just a common thing that people tend to have if you've got a connective tissue disorder. So it's the kind of intolerance to standing and sitting, to laying, and your blood pressure and your pulse kind of races and drops really quickly. So that that kind of gets a lot worse in the summer, because it's kind of hotter anyway, and you feel a bit more lightheaded. So there's lots of different things going on. It's really difficult to measure kind of like a daily life, because there isn't really one. Some days I'm having like a good day in inverted commas, and other days you can barely get out of bed. So it's really unpredictable, and all the different things, like the sort of frequent urine infections and kidney infections and things like that. Sometimes you can spot them coming, other times you might feel really good, and then literally 10 minutes later you're like hunched over. So there's no I wish there was like a way of being able to kind of understand when things are going to get worse, but yeah, there isn't really a way of tracking it. So you just have to kind of assume every day is good and then figure it out, like come to that after if you're starting to struggle. There's no way of really dealing with it. I've had it for 32 years. I'm managing it in my own way. I don't know if it's the right or wrong way to do it. But I think that's the whole point, is that everybody, whether, even if you've got the same condition, I think everybody manages it their own way. I mean, there's no right and wrong way of doing it. I think a lot of people think that like you have to work to have a purpose. I think that's a lot of things that I've noticed. I'm slightly going off topic, but I think it's an interesting point, is that kind of like daily life, a lot of the time people always center it around work. And obviously I'm lucky that I'm working now, and obviously I haven't always worked because I've struggled to find the right employer to understand like rare disease life and how it changes. But I think work has been good for me because it's helped give me a routine. But I think a lot of people outside of rare disease put far too much emphasis on what someone does for work. And obviously lots of people in the rare disease space can't work because their body kind of limits them. So I think, like I say, everybody's routine and everybody's way of dealing with something, it's purely up to them, and it's a bit of trial and error. I'm still learning, and I will be learning probably until the day I die, of how to manage it. So that's what I try and do, and just try and give it everything. And if it doesn't work, I'll figure it out next time. So.
Yeah. Now, a lot of the treatments that you're describing are obviously based off of symptoms. So, for example, like the surgeries and the painkillers and stuff like that. Are there any sort of kind of experimental therapies that are in the pipeline, or is it just completely kind of like empty?
Yeah, it's pretty empty. The only thing, as far as I know, I think there's a gene therapy for Menkes disease. So that's obviously the other thing that's linked to my condition. Obviously, I'm way too old for that now. Like, that's really aimed at kind of babies, not even really toddlers. I think it's literally babies. So obviously I'm past that stage. I don't really think that, probably in my lifetime, I don't think there'll really be anything. There might be something to help with certain aspects of my health, but it certainly wouldn't be anything for kind of an all over treatment. But I've accepted that, and I think that's kind of quite often the actual kind of reality of having an rare or an ultra rare disease. Like, just because you've got the name for it doesn't necessarily, it's good to have the name for it for some reasons, but lots of people will have a name for a condition and then have absolutely nothing practical they can do. You can kind of have like physiotherapy, and you can have surgeries when things are needed and that kind of stuff, but aside from that, there isn't anything. So I've just kind of accepted that, really, and like that's it. There's nothing more you can do.
Yeah. Aside from your kind of condition, you mentioned obviously some of the jobs that you've been doing, and you kind of work alongside Great Ormond Street a lot. What has it kind of been like working with them? Because obviously they're obviously a really big kind of children's charity, and what has it been like for you kind of growing up and kind of working alongside them as well?
Yeah, so for the context, I've been volunteering for Great Ormond Street for, I think, about 8 years maybe now. Obviously a year and a half gap kind of with COVID, nothing's happened at that time, but I started off volunteering for them when I was obviously a bit younger, and I was considered a young person at that time, which was nice. Too old for that now, but at the time I was kind of helping with different discussions, and we were quite often like transition was always the biggest conversation about like our experiences of transition, but also kind of just helping with our opinion as like a young voice in the hospital. Everybody that was in the kind of the forum that I was in, they were all either current patients or ex-patients as well. So that was obviously a really great friendship group from them as well. Started off doing that, and I did a few different other kind of panels within the hospital. And then actually that's where the public speaking side started. It was actually at Great Ormond Street. So obviously everyone knows about Great Ormond Street, I'm assuming, but obviously it's funded by the NHS, but the other part of the funding comes from the charity. So all the kind of amazing rare disease work you see happening there, and all the different amazing research, most of that is coming through the charity. So the charity is obviously a real big push to try and fundraise. That's why they're very good at it. You see lots of adverts, and you see them kind of all over the place. And obviously it's got a good profile, so lots of celebrities and stuff will be there and do as much as they can. But that's kind of really where the public speaking started. So I started doing a few kind of after dinner talks where it was kind of Great Ormond Street, where the charity they were doing the event for. So kind of half of it was to do with like how the money was used from the fundraising, but the second part of it was to do with my kind of experiences, obviously being a patient there for many years, kind of growing up and using the different facilities. So like obviously Graham Street has actually got a private school within the hospital, which is obviously quite different. I don't know many other hospitals, if any, that do that. So that was quite unique. So yeah, talking about things like that, and that's kind of where the speaking started. So did quite a few different speaking engagements at kind of big banks and law firms and publishing companies over the last few years. Obviously really enjoyed it, and I started doing some kind of in the rare disease space. So I used to live in Cambridge, which is obviously the big rare disease hub kind of outside of London, Oxford. So there's always different events kind of going on there. There's a company called Find a Cure and Cambridge Rare Disease Network, which some of you may have heard of. So I was doing some kind of talks at their events, and then it led to kind of doing the talks for work as well, and in a kind of personal capacity. So that's kind of really, I've got them to thank for giving me that chance. I know the public speaking thing was a bit different, so it wasn't really what I didn't think when I was at university that's what I was going to be doing kind of alongside my job. But yeah, really enjoyed it. I think that obviously Graham Street's got such a great reputation because of all the work it does, like in general, but obviously especially kind of in rare disease and research. Obviously it's a huge thing. There's a big rare disease centre there now, which is amazing, and so many things that happen there that is mind-blowing. Some of the surgery is like ridiculous what's been happening. So just very thankful to be there. And that was kind of my way of trying to give back. I didn't have loads of money to give the hospital to sort of thank them for all they did for me kind of growing up, but if I can give time, then that's as good as money, in my opinion. I think that through the different panels and through the kind of speaker engagements, hopefully that's kind of helps me inspire people to give money or to do something, or just at least think about the hospital and kind of consider it for different times. So yeah, really enjoyed doing all the speaker work with Graham Street, and hopefully that kind of continues when COVID allows it.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Your kind of main job now is working for the Rare Revolution magazine. We'd be able to just kind of discuss what that is and kind of what are your favorite parts of kind of working for them as well.
Yeah, sure. So I've been working for Rare Revolution for just over 3 years now. The magazine's been going for 5 years. So it was founded by two sisters. One of them's son has a rare skin condition called xeroderma pigmentosum. It's called XP. They've been running a patient group for I think maybe the last 8 years or so now, kind of helping people with their son's condition kind of all over the world. Quite often, I think in sort of South America, Africa, and Southeast Asia, I think it's the 3 biggest areas they help with. It's XP as it's called. It's like an allergic to UV lighting, so the people with the condition have to wear a mask, obviously to protect themselves from the sun, and places have to be adapted. So it's just really amazing, kind of all the work they were doing with still are doing with the patient group. Obviously that led to the magazine. So that was 5 years ago they set the magazine up. Obviously it's the only rare disease magazine that exists, so that's kind of why they wanted to set it up. We're a quarterly magazine, so kind of in terms of how it works, like sort of half of the themes are kind of on condition specific, so like rare epilepsy, rare cancers, that kind of thing. And then the other half tend to be on conversation pieces. So whether it's on gene therapy, we've done one on transition quite recently. That was quite a good one. Really enjoy working with, I work with people kind of all over the world. So we work with, every different sort of rare disease stakeholder. So whether that's patients or patient groups, charities, individuals living with rare disease, caregivers, pharmaceutical companies, biotech, medical device companies, medical students, scientists, literally anyone you can think of that is involved in rare disease. Like we're kind of hopefully part of that with the magazine. Very kind of global audience, which is really good. So it's not just speaking to people from the UK, it's people from America, Switzerland, Canada, Australia, anywhere really. So just really enjoy it. It's nice to work with a great bunch of people that are all very interested in rare disease and have a kind of passion to try and help and sort of drive change. Everyone is really interested. The people that we work with are also really passionate about what they do. I think that's really nice. My background, or what I was kind of hoping that I was going to do, was to work in finance. Obviously I'm not doing that now, but actually, like, it's funny how life has kind of led me here. So I didn't think I'd be working in a rare disease magazine and doing the other sort of different things alongside it, but actually I think I'm probably better suited to this. I think it's nice. I'm very comfortable speaking to all different kinds of people, and I think that's probably my favorite part of the job, is to speak to people kind of all day, just about different things, whether it's the sort of charity side of the magazine or whether it's the industry side, and different people literally all over the place, different rare diseases. It's just fascinating, like seeing how kind of, especially patients as well, like obviously with different rare diseases to mine, kind of some of the similarities that everybody faces. Doesn't matter where you live, how much money you've got, what rare disease you've got, everyone has got a similar pathway in something. So like whether it's the time it took to get a diagnosis, or the battles that you faced trying to get a job, or like how it's been to explain it to friends and family, or genetics testing, or whatever it is, everybody has got some similarity with all the different conditions that are, the 7,000+ rare diseases. But literally you could pick two people from many different parts of the world with different rare diseases, and I guarantee they'll still have an overlap of some of the things. I just find that really interesting. So just definitely just kind of speaking to people really is my main passion within the magazine, and just trying to hopefully make a difference and get kind of people's rare disease voice out there, and hopefully that continues.
Yeah, no, so it's a really, really great magazine. It's a really great idea to kind of, as you said, get patient voices out there. But if we kind of look at the rare disease community as a whole, what are some of the challenges that face the rare disease community, and how can the government and organisations do more to support this community?
So obviously I'm probably having to do it not from a personal one, because obviously I don't really kind of fit into this, but from a very personal perspective, I think COVID is going to make things difficult. I was kind of think when kind of COVID was probably, I don't know, like 6 months in or so, when people realized that it is going to be a big thing and it's going to be here for a long time. I was worried if it would maybe impact kind of rare disease research. That could have been a thing. I think also like fundraising for charities during COVID has been difficult, because people outside of rare disease obviously have been losing their jobs and maybe not have the same money. People that might have regularly donated or doing things are struggled. There's been no rare disease, there are now, but there's been very little kind of like, obviously the conference has been virtual, which has been good, but there's been very little kind of meetups. So the kind of social isolation, I think, from COVID for the rare disease community has been quite a big thing. One more thing on COVID, I think, would be to do with like hospitals. So kind of even like myself personally, I found it really difficult to get my appointments. So lots of them have become like telemedicine, which has been okay, but it's not suitable for everything by any means. I've been discharged from clinics because they just have to shut for the foreseeable. I think they're open again now, but that's just from my perspective. I think COVID is going to have a huge knock-on effect for the rare disease community. I think that like away from me, because obviously I don't fit into this group as such, but I think a lot of the time people just want to be understood. So like not everybody actually, I guess as well, like not everybody actually in the rare disease community has their actual diagnosis just yet, because sometimes it can vary between even, I know we keep coming back to Ehlers-Danlos, but that's also the same. So I kind of throughout people that I've met globally, like not every doctor will consider it as EDS. Some people think it's like just a high mobility thing or just something else, or some people are kind of either misdiagnosed or not diagnosed at all. So I think diagnosis is a huge issue for lots of people for a variety of different reasons. But I think just aside from the diagnosis, I think just kind of like the understanding. I think a lot of the hidden conditions, or kind of like semi hidden conditions, for another way of putting it, I think that's a huge issue, because I've noticed this quite regularly. Like if I've, like, just to give you an example, like if I'm ever using like the blue badge for parking, or if I'm using kind of priority seats on a bus or a train, if people look at you at first glance, they just think, oh, why is this young man sitting in a chair for old people? I think people need to forget this narrative that it's just old people that can sit in disabled seats and parking. If anything, like, not, because also it works the other way, not every old person is disabled. Like, I've met people in their 90s that are miles fitter than I am, that necessarily wouldn't need to sit in the priority seat. So it's this kind of like idea, especially with hidden illnesses. I think that's a huge area that needs to be kind of just in every aspect. Obviously the transport is just a kind of like, hopefully an amusing example, but like, that's just one part of it. I think it's the awareness of in schools and kind of workplaces. That's kind of the two things that I'm really passionate about and talk quite a lot about in my own sort of presentations, is understanding at work. Because I think a lot of the time, growing up and in the education system at all different levels, so from literally from primary school all the way up until university, I found dealing with my health and then not understanding any of it. You know, I don't expect them to understand about EDS. They didn't know that. Obviously, they wouldn't have a clue about occipital horn either. I think it's just getting them to understand that the sort of spectrum of disability and illness is massive. I think that you know, my university didn't really help me at all when I was trying to tell them what was going on. I think that's really common. I think that's why also a lot of people drop out of university or don't even go in the first place, just because they've heard horror stories. But hopefully that can change and more people will go. But yeah, just really like education and workplace kind of settings are, I think, two areas which will need a lot of push, especially kind of after COVID as well. I think COVID has made people realize, especially hopefully employers as well, that actually working from home benefits a lot of people. It's not just people with kids that can do childcare easier. It's actually everybody, like especially people in the rare disease space. Quite often travel is one of the biggest limitations, whereas if you can work from home, you know, I've got friends that work in all different industries that have all worked from home like every day from COVID. Like pretty much any company can make it work, obviously other than like things you had to be there for. But aside from that, I think it's proven that people can work from home, and I hope that that continues for some people, that if that's what they want, so that gives them a chance. So yeah, really, I'm kind of going off on a tangent, but really kind of the three things I guess would be like education and workplace, understanding of hidden conditions, and like diagnosis, kind of quicker diagnosis for people, I think isn't, and accurate diagnosis as well. Oh, and one more thing, mental health. I think mental health now is getting the recognition that it deserves, and I think it's a long way to go, but maybe the stigma is kind of being removed a little bit, which is good. But yeah, especially I think people, again, through COVID, people realized, you know, I think a lot of healthy people realized how difficult, you know, the isolation is of COVID, whereas actually for lots of people, they won't ever actually go back. This is a normality for some people in the rare disease space, not for me as such, but some people can, you know, don't leave the house that often, or they don't have a big friendship group because people never understood their condition, or you know relationships have broken down because of rare diseases. So actually COVID has been actually like a stark wake-up call, I think, for some people, that actually the isolation that you're temporarily going through is actually a long-term reality for lots of people with a rare disease. So I think that COVID has been an interesting wake-up call, I think, for some.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with all your points. I think that that's so true. But thank you so much for joining me today, David, and sharing your story. And I really kind of hope that in the future there's a lot more research within this area as well. So thank you so much.
Yeah, no, thank you, Shannon. Also, hopefully your listeners have maybe learned something different or had a few different ideas. So yeah, if you ever have any questions, obviously feel free. If anyone comes up with anything, obviously drop me an email. We can work something out.
That's great. Thank you.
Hello everyone, if you enjoyed this video, then make sure you check out some of our other videos in our series by subscribing below or going to our website, frontlinegenomics.com. I hope you enjoy.